we'll move on and look at some big games from this week for college football. I will say it's not as good as the previous week, but we still have some good matchups, and we can start with the one in the SEC with Tennessee traveling to Tuscaloosa, Alabama to take on the Crimson Tide. And so, when you look at that matchup, last year the Volunteers won an absolute shootout, 52-49. You had Hendon Hooker, who was a Heisman candidate, maybe the Heisman favorite after that game. A lot of hype with Tennessee. Obviously, they get upset later in the season. Hooker goes down with an ACL injury, and they end up not even getting into the playoffs. But it's a big matchup, even though they're not on the same side of the SEC. It's a big matchup for Alabama to stay in first place in that side of the bracket. If Tennessee loses, you can pretty much pencil Georgia in to that side of the SEC championship, which is going to probably happen anyway. Yeah. But still, Tennessee's probably their biggest contender on that side, so this is a big game for them. Alabama's obviously got some revenge on their mind there. But we've watched Alabama together a couple times. We already know how we feel about the quarterback, right? Jalen Milroe is not a very good quarterback, but he's the best they got. And and they still keep finding ways to win the games. But even last week, Alabama, yes, they won, but they're at home playing an Arkansas team who's 2-4 against a quarterback who has not played all that great this year. And they essentially have to get a defensive stop to win the game. The Razorbacks had the ball on the 50-yard line going in to kick a field goal to tie the game, if not win with a touchdown. And it took a sack of Jefferson and a couple first downs to end the game. Do you think we can break down this game together? But do you think that Alabama has any shot to finish with one loss and still get in?
I would say no, for the simple fact that I think a one-loss Texas gets in ahead of them. And I mean, in reality, if Oklahoma loses to Texas in a super, super tight Big 12 championship game and they beat Texas at a neutral site, I don't know how you don't put Oklahoma. Alabama has not looked at, it would be different if they're blowing people out, right? Or in their eye test, like, oh, these guys are good. It was just a slow start, yada. But no, I mean, they just have looked very unimpressive from an Alabama, from what we usually expect out of Alabama. They're a good team. They're a top 15 team, but I mean, I just don't think that they're, even with one loss, that they deserve to get in. We'll see how things shake out. But I know that they haven't looked good. I know that Arkansas gave them a good game. Arkansas sneaky gives everybody a good game and ends up losing somehow.
They give a good game every other week. They give LSU a good game, then they get stomped. Then they give Alabama a good game. This week they're probably going to get stomped. So
yeah. But they I think that Tennessee's just lost too much on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, I don't expect it to be near as high scoring as last year, and when you lose Hooker, Hyatt, and Tillman, I mean, those guys are all going to be, probably decent pros. So it's hard to replace that, especially at Tennessee, who's obviously on the rise with Heupel. But Alabama will be too much for him at home, and I expect Alabama to win that game by at least a touchdown.
Yeah, and I think you look at the quarterback position being the biggest loss, in my opinion. I think Hendon Hooker, in my opinion, he was the best player in college football through the first 9 weeks of the season last year. And I thought he was going to win the Heisman if Tennessee doesn't get upset. Even if they get with that upset, if he doesn't get hurt and they win and go 11-1 and go to the SEC title game, I still think he might win the Heisman there.
I agree. Yeah, he was
incredible.
He was awesome.
And the way their offense was so high powered, right? Obviously, Jalen Hyatt is on the Giants, and he's been already playing. But in addition to that, you just look at the replacement of Hooker, and Joe Milton is just, it's one of those things where it was kind of a hype train again before the season. It's like, okay, he's got this massive arm, he's so talented, and everybody was talking about him, and it's just like, there's a reason he's been sitting on the bench for 4 years.
They're the same player. That's why I always get them mixed up. Joe Milroe and Joe Milton.
Jalen Milroe and Joe Milton.
Yeah,
the same player.
The same player.
Big arm.
They're both
great athletes.
Tremendous athletes.
Not quarterbacks.
They do some bonehead stuff, and they stare guys down. They can both throw a pretty decent deep ball, but other than that, I mean, there's a reason that they weren't, bona fide starters as, freshman players.
Yeah.
Because Milton came from Michigan, correct?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, so.
And Milton, I think, is slightly worse than Milroe, but I also think that Milroe just has more weapons around him because I watched Alabama, Arkansas. I've watched every Alabama game, and every single time, we have the setup with 5 TVs where we got every game going. Every time I look over and glance and I see Milroe throw a pass, it without fail, if it's within 20 yards, the receiver is having to jump. Like, it's almost like he doesn't know how to throw the ball in the direction of like a chest. It's every time it's up here and it's a reach or it's a jump. So it's just inaccuracy. But
and Burton's awesome, like you said, at Alabama.
He's a
you
beast.
just throw it to him. He's gonna go get it.
And so Tennessee struggled last week. I don't say it struggled, but it was a tight game against an A&M team that
ran the ball pretty well against the Aggies.
They did.
Good front seven, so that's hopeful for them.
That's how they beat Alabama.
Yeah, I don't expect this to be a blowout. I just can't see Tennessee going into Tuscaloosa and winning that game. They don't know. They just don't look good enough to me to do that. They're certainly not as good as a Texas who did it, or even anywhere close to that same level.
Yeah, I don't think they are either. They did run the ball, like you said, well, but this is the only saving grace I would say is this is a 2:30 Central Time kickoff as opposed to if it's a night kickoff. I think they have no chance. Tuscaloosa at night is wild, but I still think I agree with you. I'd probably say I'll go with Alabama by 10. Tennessee's one shot is what you said. If you can run the ball in Alabama, right? They are not an Alabama of old. You can run the ball in them. If you can run the ball and you can control the clock and shorten the game, and Tennessee's defense is actually a little bit better this year. Their offense is just so much worse that they're not as good. But Alabama's offense is so unexplosive that they just rely significantly. I mean, they have explosive plays, but they just have no ability to maintain consistent success. So it's like, if you can get a lead there and run the ball, maybe it gets interesting. But I agree. I think they're probably too much for them. I'll take Alabama in that one for sure as well. Moving on, a couple other matchups here for the big game preview, and I think we'll go to the biggest matchup of the week. I probably should have led with this, but we've got one I think I'm looking forward to more than any game. I was really excited for Washington and Oregon last week, but Penn State, undefeated, traveling to Ohio State, undefeated. Both are 6-0, both are 3-0 in the Big Ten. We talked about this before we get into the preview, how idiotic it is that they have two conference sides, right? And you have on one side Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, and Michigan State, who this year is bad, but normally is just up there as well.
Yeah.
And so you have all those teams on one side, and the other side is like Purdue, Northwestern, Iowa, Wisconsin, and that side's more down than it's ever been. So you have essentially the top of the Big Ten where it's 1, 2, 3, all 3 teams undefeated, all 3 teams 6-0. They're all going to play each other once. It's going to go around the horn of like who can beat who can go 2-0 in that little matchup. But it's just like idiotic that whoever comes out of that is going to play, Wisconsin, or it looks like Iowa, actually. That's the team that looks like they're going to play. And they're going to stomp Iowa. I mean, Penn State already played them, beat them 31-0, and didn't even play that well. So it's really stupid that it's set up that way, and they need to fix that.
Yeah, I think when USC and Oregon move over there, I don't know what the plans are, but I assume it's just going to turn into one big super conference with the 2 best teams playing each other for the conference championship. I would assume they're going to get rid of sides, but I don't know. Maybe they're not.
Yeah, you never know.
I have no idea. But yeah, as you said, one side's just absolutely loaded for football.
Yeah.
So it's going to be tough for Penn State to go in there and beat Ohio State, I think. Like you said, I think James Franklin's never won.
He's 0-4 in Columbus.
And now, typically, Ohio State has a better team. So, I mean, it's not that surprising. I haven't seen Penn State play much this year, but like you said, they beat an Iowa team 31-0, who, Iowa's non-existent on offense, but I'm just impressed with them scoring 31 points on Iowa's defense. Iowa's got a good defense. So, will be interesting to see that matchup. And yeah, like you said, I'm really looking forward to it too, because I haven't seen Penn State play much. From what I've seen at Ohio State and Michigan, I think Michigan's way better than Ohio State.
I do too.
Yeah.
I think Michigan's the best team in the country. I'm going to get to my power rankings later, but that's how I feel. I think they're the best, most complete team in the country. But I just think that the reason I'm so excited to see this game is we're going to find out a ton about these two teams. Like, my feeling is you look at Ohio State, Notre Dame, and I don't, we're not going to get too in-depth on stats and analytics in here, but you look at Ohio State in that Notre Dame game, listen to this stat. Ohio State had a 4% post-game win expectancy against Notre Dame, meaning if you look at the numbers and you look at the plays and everything that happened in the game, right, there's a 4% chance they win the game. And it just came down to some really stupid decisions and defensive play calls and timeouts by Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame that gave Ohio State the game. They handed it to them, right? That game's played 100 times, 96 times. Notre Dame beats them. Yep. You come into this game, and if that's the case, you probably have a lot of people thinking, oh, Penn State's going to win this game for sure. Now, you look at Penn State on the other hand, you look at their schedule. Like you said, beating Iowa is impressive, 31-0, right? But they did get Iowa at home. The rest of their schedule, they played West Virginia week 1 before West Virginia had any, remnants of a passing game. They played Delaware, Illinois, Northwestern, and UMass. So it's just the strength of schedule outside of Iowa is horrific. So my biggest question, and this is what I think is the determining factor in the game, because I think Penn State's defense is good, and I don't think Ohio State's offense is as good as anybody really believes. Like against Notre Dame, if the ball is intercepted that Kyle McCord throws, or if it's not a first down on 4th and 18, they scored 10 points in that game and lose. So instead, they score, and the story is, McCord, leads game-winning drive, right? Is a couple plays away from being completely different outcome, different storyline. But I think Penn State defense stops Ohio State's offense relatively well. I think above expectation. I don't see Ohio State scoring more than 20 points in this game. It's going to be a low-scoring battle anyway. But the question for me, and this is the number one question, and this will determine the game, is Drew Allar, the quarterback for Penn State, is he legit? And he's not been bad. He's been better than average. Again, against bad competition.
Yep.
He's a 5-star kid, highly touted coming out of high school. Everybody was calling for him to take Sean Clifford's job the last couple years. But again, like Milton, there's a reason that Sean Clifford, who wasn't very good, was the starting quarterback the last 2 years. And that's because this kid hasn't developed like everybody thought. Is he good? Yes. Is he good enough to go into Columbus and beat Ohio State? That's what we're going to find out this weekend. That's why I'm excited to see the game.
And I have your answer. No, he's not. Ohio State will win the game. And this is funny. This game I would pick. If it was played at Penn State, and it should be white out at night,
100%.
I'd take Penn State, that defense, 100% of the time. At home, with that young quarterback, no fans screaming and yelling, with the best receiver in college football, and I don't know if Jigba or whatever is, or he left the league.
Marvin Harrison Jr.
Marvin Harrison Jr. is the number one, but
they got another kid.
The other kid that had all those catches against Notre Dame, he was out this last week. But if they have both those guys playing, and I forget what his name is, but they're gonna. I think they'll beat Penn State at home. Now, like I said, if it was at Penn State, I would definitely go with Nittany Lions, but I think Ohio State beats them this week. I think that, although you said it, I do believe Penn State's defense is probably better on paper.
Yeah.
When you have that crazy athletes and that much talent on offense, you're just going to score some points. Some points. I don't think it's going to be a ton, like you said, but I just have more faith in Ohio State at home than I do in James Franklin trying to win on the road in Columbus.
That's the great equalizing factor here, is that I have never liked James Franklin. And, this is a guy, at every big game, I remember a game that they played, I believe this was in Ohio State, and it was back when this was the best Penn State team they ever had. It was Trace McSorley at quarterback. They had, I don't know if it was Chris Godwin? There was another receiver who's in the league now, who got drafted by maybe.
I think it's a guy I think it was KJ Hamler.
Yes, Hamler was the receiver, and then they had obviously Saquon Barkley at running back.
Yeah.
And they were up 21 in Columbus and choked the game away. And
that was probably 4 years ago.
It was 4 or 5 years ago.
Probably
it was
4. Yeah,
it was 2018. So it's kind of just like, until you prove me otherwise, I don't trust James Franklin in a big game, especially not on the road. Yeah. Like you said, if this was in Happy Valley, I would be all over Penn State.
Yeah, they would win the game,
right?
I think.
Which kind of sucks for Penn State, because I think I think they're going to lose to Michigan either way. So it's like they play Michigan at home, and they play Ohio State on the road. If that was flipped and they played Michigan on the road, I think it'd be better.
That would be better
because they'd
for
win
them,
one.
yeah.
I think they would win against Ohio State. But I do think that it's going to be a great game. I think that the defense of Penn State will keep them in it enough, right, to make this a tight game. And maybe I'm wrong, but I think that Penn State defense is for real. Well, we're going to find out a lot about both of these teams in this matchup, and we'll look at just a couple other college football topics. We've got Texas taking on Houston. I mean, I think both of us think the Longhorns are still really good despite the OU loss, yep. Right? And Texas pretty much now they have no margin for error. They got to run through the rest of their competition the rest of the year. I'll ask you this question. I think similar to Texas, Oregon is in the same kind of position. Like, if they win out, they probably still have a decent chance of making it, and I think they're a really good football team. But they're taking on a Washington State team who I have no explanation for what has happened to them. They essentially went from a team who was one of the better offensive teams in the country with a quarterback who looked like a legit Heisman contender after 4 weeks, and every week I was like, nah, they're not for real. And then after week 4, finally doing it for the 4th time, I'm like, okay, I'm a believer now. And right after I said that, they lose back-to-back games, and they put up a total of 21 points in 2 weeks against, last week a team in Arizona who gave up 50 to USC. So it just doesn't make a lot of sense. What has happened to Washington State?
No, I have no idea. I'm right there with you. I have zero explanation. I don't know. Cam Ward's a great quarterback. The defense for them actually looked pretty serviceable and decent as well. The first few weeks, they weren't bad. And then they lost to UCLA and Arizona, right?
Yes.
The more the unexplainable is like, obviously Arizona killed them, but you expect Arizona to score some points. It was just that Washington State scored none, basically.
Yeah. Yes.
So, yeah, I have
Crazy.
no idea.
How do you score 6 points?
I mean,
they were at home at night.
Their OC from last year, Eric Morris, left and took the head coaching job at North Texas.
Yeah.
So that
could be
maybe has something to do with it.
Right.
But they were pretty good, like you said, early on. And I was a believer in them, too. And they just kind of fell off the face of the earth there pretty bad. I don't know how or why or what could be different. We don't follow Washington State that closely. I don't know about injuries or anything.
Right, I don't either, but I couldn't imagine it'd be if you have your quarterback still, I couldn't imagine it'd be that big. But yeah, it's like, to me, I don't understand how you go from that good of an offense to that bad. Like, you could explain a UCLA putting up 15 against UCLA, like that happens, a stinker, but I thought for sure a bounce back at home at night. That's one of the tougher places to play. It's an underrated home field advantage at Wazoo up in Pullman.